Hey everybody, Chad with Just Add Wood. Thanks for coming back and joining us for part three of this patio build that you see behind me here. Um, it's taking entirely too long to show all of the footage and to put everything in here, so we're going to start skipping around a little bit, try to speed things up so this doesn't become a 27 part mini series. There probably will be a part four, but it is what it is. If I miss anything or if I go too fast, please feel free to leave something in the comments, questions, or comments or concerns or compliments. Leave it in the comments. I'll be happy to go over anything that I glaze over. But in the effort of brevity, I'm gonna start trying to shorten these videos up a little bit. Thanks again for joining us for part three. Let's get started. Didn't have the sound on. Let's try this again. Time to move on to the roof rafters you see behind me. Well, you see the one temporary roof rafter behind me. To get started on the rafter part of this project, there are a gazillion ways to figure out angles and bird's mouths and rise and run and pitch and angles and whatever. Some will probably call it cheating, but all I did was hold my roof rafter up against the house, scribed where it needed to be cut, brought it back down to the workbench, cut it out, made sure it fit, and then because the patio is uniformly square, it's rectangle all the way around with the same dimensions, all of the common rafters will be the same size. So I just used this first one after I perfected it through trial and error. I used it as a template for the rest of the rafters. So it all came together using this one as a template. Now I did hold a speed square up to the angle using the pivot point of the speed square so I could discover that it was about a 412 pitch. I made sure my bird's mouth angle matched and the rafter tail angle matched. But besides that, all I essentially did was hold it up against the house, scribe where it needed to be cut it, made sure it worked, and then duplicated that one a million more times. And a quick thanks to Paul Ricaldi. Please check his channel out, where he showed me how to use a clip here to put it on the angle so that your speed square always lands on the same angle. And once I knew what that angle was, it was as easy as setting up stop blocks on my miter saw, using some scrap leftover 1x4 trim to set up really long stop blocks, and then set up the angle pocket on the other end. So that all I had to do was cut first angle cut and then flip it over, set it in this pocket, cut second tail end of the angle, and all of my rafters should be identical in length. Cutting all the ridges and all the tails produced an insane amount of scraps. So here I am playing with my wood on YouTube. Sorry, that was just wrong. After that delightful intermission, once all the rafters were dialed in, I went ahead and bored holes while they were stacked up to allow room to run wires through them later. I don't exactly know where the wires are going to run, but I figured it was easier to go ahead and drill holes now while they're on the workbench rather than drilling individual holes while they're over my head once they're installed. Back at the ledger board. Does everyone remember the ledger board from way back in video 1? Anyway, ledger board's still there. And here I am marking the joist 24 inches on center, all the way down the line and around the corner. With all of the joists cut and drilled and fitting perfectly, it's time to get them all installed and attached to the ridge. Busted. Admired my own work. Okay, that's enough. Get back to work, Chad. Despite having marked 24 inch on center on both the ridge and the beam, I found it easier just to use a scrap block of wood to use as a spacer. So I just lined up the first joist very true and very square, made sure my spacer was the right length, and then I would just drop the spacer in between each, attach the next, and move it forward, and so forth and so on. Having said that, if you use this method, make darn sure your spacer is correct and your first joist is correct, because if it's off ever so slightly, it's going to be off on each one, and that effect's going to be compounded on down the line by every rafter you install. All right, with just a few rafters left to put in place, I've gone ahead and cut the strip out of the siding so that I can install flashing and step flashing as we start installing shingles. Bam! Like magic, the 14-inch flashings already slid underneath the siding. And in the corner here, thanks to RR Builders, you should check their channel out, he showed me how to bend up metal so that I could put a piece of flashing in that corner and have it not leak. And there's the 14-inch flashing stuffed underneath the siding all the way down the slope. And then from here, I'm just going to install that last rafter. I thought it would be easier to install the 14-inch flashing underneath the siding first, just leave it straight, and then use the rafter being pushed into place to sort of bend it into a 90 down the slope there. Last few screws, and there we go. We're off to do some hip rafters. And so with the hip rafters, it was really just sort of trial and error. I was able to measure 24 inches over because I wanted these to be a 24-inch on center. So I measured 24 inches over, not along any of the hip rafters there. I just sort of floated it out to make sure it was a true 24 inches over, and then measured using that same common rafter scale on the speed square, marked my vertical line, and then nailed in a temporary nail to help hold the joist in place, and then set my rafter in place, drew where I thought the heel cut, the bird mouth needed to be cut, and then went from there. A lot of trial and error, and plenty of mistakes were made, which you'll see in a few moments when you see some of the rest of the cuts. But there was a little bit of wasted wood, some trial and error, but it all worked out in the end. Oops. Okay, everybody point and laugh at my mistake. Sometimes when you're winging it, mistakes are bound to happen. Well, look at there. With all of the roof rafters finally in place, we can move ahead and start installing the 5/8 plywood. I am using plywood, and I am using 5/8, which is a little thicker because all of the supporting joists are 24-inch on center, which is a little farther apart than 16-inch on center, so you want a little thicker plywood up there. The only thing you want to remember with plywood when you're laying it up there is you want to install it in sort of a running bond or a brick looking pattern. You don't want any four corners to come together, so overlap your next row so that your corners don't meet up. Due to the incriminating evidence we see on the screen, we need to have an immediate safety meeting. OSHA does not condone moving a ladder while you're standing on said ladder, nor do they approve standing on the top rung. Thank you. Without any questions, meeting adjourned. All right, with the plywood mostly installed, we've got the patio just about dried in. We've got all the plywood filled in. We've cut off all of the overhang, the plywood I left long and overhung the tails. We've cut it off flush with the tails. And then on the ends, install the fascia board across the sides and the front, the rake, the slope, and across the eave and the front here. Then we're gonna install drip edge over that, and we're gonna install our felt and our shingles coming up next. Whew. To all those blue-collar workers who work outdoors in this heat and in this weather, my hat's off to you. This is miserable. This is a typical southeastern Georgia summer, and the heat and humidity is intense. It's so oppressive you almost can't breathe out here. So these guys that work outside and in construction and other industries that are outside every day, all day, rain, sleet, or shine, like the postman, hats off to you. Keep it up. This is crazy. Anyway, so moving right along, you can see behind me we got the fascia board on all the way around. So plywood's on, the fascia boards are on, and we can move on now to the next step in the process, which is to get the drip edge installed, because the drip edge, there's a specific order of operations when you're doing roofing, and drip edge on this eave, on this flat part, goes on first, and then your felt overlaps that drip edge. On the rakes or any of the inclines, like the end over here, on this rake or incline, the felt goes on first, and then your drip edge goes on over the felt to hold the felt down, so, for any wind. So we'll move on to the drip edge next. All right, well, the drip edge is up. Actually, that's not entirely true. I'm short one piece of drip edge, but the drip edge is up except for about 6 feet of it. All right, roof is officially dried in at this point. We've installed all of 15-pound felt, and we've overlapped all of the edges. All right, so with the roof dried in, with felt paper or tar paper, you put the shingles on, and you start putting shingles on by staggering your first few rows. You start with a full piece, and then you cut a few inches off the next piece, and you cut a few inches off the next piece, then you cut a few inches off the next piece, and so you stagger so none of your seams line up. You do that all the way up, and then you start with a full piece again, and then you carry your rows all the way over. Well, good morning, everyone. It is the next morning. Fortunately, my two sons were able to come help me put the roof on. So most of it's done, and I just wanted to take a minute to kind of point out what we've been doing. Part of the flashing detail, we've run shingles all the way up underneath this piece of flashing, which goes up underneath the siding. And then we're gonna put another layer of shingles across the top here, hiding the flashing. So we're just gonna cover this up and do a little row across the top. All of the field shingles are in place. Now, obviously we have to put the ridge cap. So once we finish this little side here, I'll be able to put the ridge cap shingles over the hip joint over here. And then over here, we're doing step flashing in addition to a base flashing, or whatever it's called. I'm not sure what this flashing is called. You can see I accidentally poked a hole in it. But this flashing is going behind the siding and on top of the tar paper, but under the shingles. And then in between each row of shingles, we're putting on a bit of step flashing. So step flashing slides in there and overlaps on the piece of siding in front of it. So this piece will drain onto the shingle or onto this piece, which then would drain and turn onto the next shingle. So no water can get in this wall. This is where a roof meets a wall, and we don't want any water to get in there. And then we'll have a similar connection here in the corner where the shingles will go underneath the flashing, and we'll put a row on top of that. And got a gutter downspout, and then at some point we'll add gutters to this entire patio. But until then, I'm just gonna finish up this little section here, try to get it done while it's cloudy out and before it starts raining. Okay, looks like we've completed the roof. Whew. That's hard work. This Georgia summer heat is something else, even as cloudy as it is. Whole roof is installed, downspouts or kickouts are back on and cut to the appropriate height. And it looks like I can climb down, and next we can focus on electrical. Take a trip with me, if you will, back in time to before I installed the roof. I want to show you the access hole I installed that's going to be hidden by that first roof joist to pull some wires. What was in the wall was a single light fixture, just a little carriage light. I'm going to replace this single carriage light with a 4-outlet GFCI ground fault circuit interrupted outlets that will be switched. So one set is going to be 4 outlets, 2 will be switched, 2 will be always on, and then another switch for the outdoor lighting. And so what I've done on the inside is I've swapped this, what was a normal 2-switch outlet with a normal switch, to a double switch. So now we can have a switch for lights and a switch for outlets, and then we'll have the fully powered, all the time powered outlet out there as well. So I'm installing this cut-in box, and they say it's a cut-in box instead of new construction because rather than nailing it to the stud that's in there, this has these little flip-up pins that are going to hold it against the wall. So this is a cut-in box or an old construction box. And what I've done is I've traced where this circle box was. I'm sure that's the official name. I've traced a line where the round outlet was, the round box for a light fixture box. I don't know what the official term is for it. I've just put this double box on the wall, centered it in the hole, traced a line around it so the tabs will fit on the outside, and then cut the siding back. So our square box will fit in a round hole. As you're watching me pull the wires through the box and put the box in the hole, go ahead and call this video done. Appreciate you watching. Be sure and tune in next time as we will wrap up the electrical, we'll install a ceiling, we'll have gutters installed, and we'll really call this project done for good. Thanks for watching.